Three women who have publicly accused Donald Trump of sexually inappropriate behavior. They are speaking out again this morning. They are among more than a dozen women who have accused the president of sexual misconduct over the course of 30 years. All of that, of course, became such an explosive part of the 2016 election. But listen to this.
In an objective setting, without question, a person with this record would have entered the graveyard of political aspirations, never to return. Yet here we are with that man as president. I want to believe that as Americans we can put aside our political inclinations and admit that some things in fact do transcend politics, that we will hold Mr. Trump to the same standard as Harvey Weinstein and the other men who were held accountable for their reprehensible behavior. Therefore, I ask that Congress put aside their party affiliations and investigate Mr. Trump's history of sexual misconduct.
So there's that. Let's get over to the White House now, though. CNN's Joe Johns is there. Joe, as you just heard, they're calling for an investigation by Congress. Is the White House reacting?
Kate, the White House continues to stand by its denials that the events never happened. We haven't, at least so far this morning, been able to get a timely, attributable, on-the-record denial after the latest developments, but we've been referred again and again to the president's own words. For example, when he was candidate Trump back in October of last year, Donald Trump said, "In Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the events never happened, never. All of these liars will be sued after the election is over." Of course, to our knowledge, the president hasn't sued anyone over claims like this. But one of the most interesting things, of course, is that the message that is coming out of the White House is not exactly lockstep. The president's hand-picked representative to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, over on CBS over the weekend, suggested that, as a matter of course, allegations like this ought to be heard. Listen.
Women who accuse anyone should be heard. They should be heard and they should be dealt with. And I think we heard from them prior to the election. And I think any woman who has felt violated or felt mistreated in any way, they have every right to speak up.
So the president's position is obviously that nothing ever happened. Nikki Haley says these things ought to be heard. Interesting also to point out, as we talk about Roy Moore so much over the next 24 hours or so, one of the president's statements from early on in the Roy Moore controversy really tell you a lot about his feelings about the allegations against him as well as Roy Moore. He said, like most Americans, the president believes, the statement said, we cannot allow a mere allegation, in this case from many years ago, to destroy a person's life. So I'm sure there will be some more questions for the White House on this today. Kate, back to you.
Absolutely. Great to see you, Joe. Thank you so much. Many questions for the White House on this today, I would assume. Joining me now to discuss, Ed Martin is here, CNN political commentator, author of The Conservative Case for Trump. He's also supporting Roy Moore in this special election. Angela Rye is a CNN political commentator and former executive director of the Congressional Black Caucus. Caitlin Huey-Burns is a reporter for Real Clear Politics. Great to see all of you. Thanks for being here. Caitlin, three of the president's accusers, as Joe shown us right there, speaking out today, now asking for Congress to investigate the president on these past allegations. Is there any possibility that that actually happens?
It's really hard to see right now. Every time a lawmaker is asked about this, they essentially say, look, we're trying to clean house and handle this in Congress right now, not going to comment on the president.
We're dealing with
the legislative branch. Which actually brings up a really interesting point, which is that Congress, as it pertains to lawmakers, they are trying to address this issue. You can argue that they have been lagging behind other institutions. They haven't been doing it as effectively. There are some members of Congress still with outstanding allegations made against them remaining in Congress, but it does set up a very important contrast here. And Nikki Haley is someone who presumably wants a future in politics beyond this White House, beyond this presidency. You know, the politics of this have certainly shifted over the past 2 months, let alone the past year since the election. I'm wondering if that has anything to do with it.
Well, and I find what Nikki Haley said fascinating, Ed. I mean, Ambassador Haley comments on the president's accusers. She didn't say that they should be believed. She did say, though, that they should be heard. She also said that they should be dealt with or would be dealt with, as if to say that it wasn't over, which seems in contrast pretty starkly to what the White House says about this. What do you make of what she said?
Well, I thought Nikki Haley, part of it was echoing, I think, what Senator Collins said, which is as much as you'd like to go back past and some would go back and redo the election, many of these allegations were heard. But if there's new ones, there is such a thing as free speech, and there's a such thing as obviously media coverage is, I think, okay, and probably will happen and should. But here's the thing: when people call on Congress to investigate, there's a $17 million slush fund that Congress paid out to people. They haven't even confessed and put that out. Like, so the idea that Congress is going to clean up itself.
Well, they're working on that. That's one of the bills that's one of the bills that's been proposed.
And CNN did a great job covering that. I think that's important. But that now we have judicial members, judges who've been accused of things. They have to get it. I mean, look, we have elections when it comes to the presidency about whether you think this is, disqualifying. If they have a complaint otherwise, then come forward. But again, a lot of this is politics, and the American people are not. My old boss, Kate Phyllis Schlafly, once said, we don't elect a pastor, we elect a president. I think a lot of people are looking up saying, okay, lots of things going on with every president. And like the book on Obama, the new biography about his life, I don't think we should go back and litigate that. We should go forward. And
I will say, when it comes to this sexual harassment conversation that is going on around the country, I think just saying that there's so many of the, and I don't know if that's your implication, but there's so many of them, how do they have time to investigate? I don't think that's a good enough excuse. I think maybe if there's a lot of them, there's a reason they should all be investigated. But Angela, let me bring you in on this. When it comes to Ambassador Haley, what does that say about her position within the White House or with the president? I mean, do you think anyone else could say this and survive?
Well, I'm expecting a tweet from Donald Trump responding to Nikki Haley in T-minus 2 minutes. As soon as your segment goes off,
really?
He's going to be tweeting about Nikki Haley. Absolutely. I think one thing that I do want to go back to as the resident protector of all things Barack Obama's legacy, he has never been accused of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment, or sexual assault. Yes, I just named myself that, Kate. And I think it's very important that we make a really big distinction here. I think that if we're all honest in this segment and we can lay all partisan differences aside, if there was any member of Congress in the upper or lower chamber, if there was any state senator, state legislator whatsoever, if there was a mayor, if there was a city commissioner who said on tape the things that Donald Trump has said he did on tape, and then there were stories that came out not from 1, not from 2, not from 5, not from 10, but from 16 women that had parallel experiences with an elected official, he would be under the jail, definitely impeached, and not sitting in office. I think we have to be honest about the fact that for whatever reason, he has been Teflon Don from the moment he came down the escalator. This has to be dealt with. And you can groan, but it's true. And I might not be electing a pastor, but I definitely want to ensure that someone who sits in a place as commander-in-chief can set an example for my 5 godsons, my 1 goddaughter, and for the baby that Kate is carrying right now.
I'm gonna say it. Don't bring my baby into this.
That's in a good way. That's in a good way to set a good example. That's a good example, Kate.
Ed, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know what the standard is here. I mean, Al Franken confessed. I had the pictures of his conduct. People have, and the president has denied these things. And so, again, I mean, if we're going to go through, line up all the senators and let's have hearings. I've called for Al Franken to chair hearings where every allegation in the last 40 years against every sitting senator shall be brought forth.
He's resigning.
And when we do that,
this is what I feel like you're trying to have it both ways, my friend.
No,
you're saying let people be heard, and then with what comes out of your mouth next is diminishing the words people are saying and what's coming out of people's mouths.
No. They get to say what they want. The question is whether they're believable. And if the president says he didn't do what they accused him of, the voters voted. At what point do we keep going back and rehashing this? I just don't get it.
No, I know you're raising the question, and what the women who spoke out this morning said is they think that this is a different moment in this country, and they would like it to be looked at. You clearly feel very differently. Caitlin, there are 3 Democrats who've now come out and called on the president to resign based on, I'm just going to call it the Al Franken model, right? Sure. It happened before he was a senator. It came out since. Is there anything serious about them actually coming out to say this?
Well, these are all Democrats, but it does speak to the underlying kind of, or the hope of that this would be an implication of Democrats with Franken, with Conyers, with others, saying that, look, we've taken care of this on our side, putting the spotlight back onto Republicans and Trump, especially ahead of this Alabama Senate race, which will be very interesting. I mean, this is why the Trump endorsement kind of matters here beyond this Senate race, because the Trump endorsement of more seems to, overlook.
And I also want to bring this up really quickly because we've talked about this a lot, and David Chalian brought something up earlier, Ed, that I want to get your take on.
Okay.
Leave all of the allegations of molestation and inappropriate behavior aside. This is a man who had a long history, and that's why a lot of Republicans already had departed from him before these allegations had even come out, that homosexual conduct should be illegal. The only thing that Islam has given us is 9/11, and that he just said, and it was just last year, he said that he still didn't think that President Obama was born in the United States. That's just 3 examples. How is that not a problem for Republicans should he be in Congress?
Well, look, I've answered this question a lot the last day or so. To me, it's the end of the campaign, and people are taking the most extreme things he said, a lot of which I don't know when he said them or how he said them, and they're making them sound like it's the end of the case. I mean, here's the thing.
No, Ed. That's like the 3rd time, I think, maybe even just to me, that you've given that. You've said that you haven't heard the context and you don't exactly know when these were said. If you have time, you've had the time to look at it. I can go through them right now if you want.
But if you have time for me to answer each of them, I can. But I don't think what I'm saying is it's the Alabama voters know the guy for decades and they can do it. I mean, if you want me to answer each of them, I can.
Well, let me add one more. I want you to answer this one. Tell me why, when he was asked when America was at its greatest at a campaign rally, he said it was at its greatest during slavery. Tell me why he said that.
That's not what he said.
That's not
what he said.
So he said that families loved each other then. So tell me what was great in family. Tell me about that one.
No,
Ed,
but that's not.
Give me a final note, though. I want to know how this is not, no matter if it's extreme or he said other things, he still said these things, how these are not a problem if he makes it to Congress.
He's getting elected to the Senate. When he gets to the Senate, he's going to have to vote on things, and slavery is not going to be voted on in the Senate, and it's not neither is homosexuality. And here's the thing: let's be clear, because it's such a slur against him. What he said was families still love each other when they existed. People in bondage, when the Jews were in bondage for years, they still loved each other. The point is that there can still be great. No, I'm not kidding you. Listen to what he said.
You're going to hedge on slavery? Can you just acknowledge right here on this program?
No, I'm not. I'm condemning slavery. I'm condemning slavery, and so does Roy Moore.
That's not what he did. He talked about no, he didn't. He said America was at its greatest during slavery when families loved each other.
Go listen to what he said.
The statement was the last time that America was great. And he said, I think it was great at a time when families were united, even though we had slavery, they cared for one another.
People,
you want to endorse that, Ed?
No, that's not. But he didn't say that's what we need to go back to for greatness. He said when there was slavery, it's a terrible thing. I denounce it. But there were still families that loved each other.
You're adding stuff. That's not what he said.
We're not. Slavery's not going to be voted on in the U.S. Senate, is it? We're all against it. I'll lead the charge.
Ed, I'm going to stop this right now. I know. Believe me, Angela, you're going to be mad at me too. But Ed, on the face of it, it is not acceptable to say just because I don't think he's going to have to vote on something
that
this statement doesn't matter. We have no clue what's going to be coming up, and I'm not saying it's going to be the issues we're discussing right now. But statements that are said in public, these were not in private. These were not anonymous sources, but statements that are said in public are statements that traditionally that's what politicians should and are held accountable for.
Correct,
if they can't be held accountable for statements they have made in public, then what the hell are we going to vote on? What the hell do we hold them for account for?
But Kate, he did not say he was for slavery. He did not say slavery was a good idea. We should bring it back. He described the family.
Well, if you want a more stark example, homosexual conduct should be illegal. That one was pretty straightforward.
Don't you agree that there are people that have a position that they think homosexuality is wrong, but doesn't mean we want legislation like that? I don't support that. So,
but your president just tried to ban transgender people from the military. Of course they're voting on these issues. Of course they're up for debate.
That has nothing to do with homosexuality, transgenders in the military. Nothing to do with it.
You know what I support? I support you all not being able to get Viagra in the military then. This is ridiculous. You all. Men.
She's talking about men.
Okay. I wasn't sure what group she meant.
Seriously.
I'm talking about men. I'm talking about all the men who are
the
hypocrites.
vapors.
She
said you
sexual
all, and she meant
misconduct.
men.
Yeah, I'm talking about
all right.
men folk.
I'm not in the military. I don't know. I mean,
Men.
I'm stopping all of you. And I'm not a man, at least for today. Ed, Angela, Caitlin, thank you. Coming up.
Thanks, Kate.